everybody, it's Mackey's Motors, Race My Buick. I'm going to give you a quick roundabout around a Baja Motorsports Dune 150. This one's slightly modified. The frame remains original. It's still powered by the Howitt 150 engine, which was bored out. It's got quite a few upgrades on it, and I just want to walk you through the basics, so when you pick one of these up, you know what you're talking about. And we'll start at the back and work our way forward. All the Baja Dune 150s from 2005 to 2007 had the Howitt 150cc engine. It's a CVT transmission, which means there is a variator on the engine side, and then on the back side is a torque converter and clutch that transfers power from the engine to the gearbox. Runs off of a CDI ignition. This is an AC system. They don't convert it to DC, so you have AC coming directly out of the stator. That power comes up to a regulator, into the CDI, your starter solenoid, and the ignition coil. The big thing about these is letting them breathe. The fastest way to get power to a 150cc engine is putting a better carburetor on it. A redneck kit is what they call it when you have a tube with a unifilter on there for freer flowing air. Also, an upgraded manifold. I have a high-rise manifold on mine. It's more of an experiment for torque and getting some more bottom end out of it. Once you've upgraded the fuel system, you have to upgrade the exhaust. So a performance exhaust, or what I used to do was completely gut the original muffler that was on there with a blowtorch. After you've got the engine breathing and fueling much better, eating and breathing better, the next thing up would be the CVT mods. Everybody says, you know, you can put an ignition coil on it. I do have an orange coil on there. I do have a cheap Chinese CDI on there, but I've just been experimenting with different CDIs to see if there's any difference. I really have not found any huge performance gains from changing to this style, but, you know, it remains to be said. I have the cover off just to show you everybody what the wiring looks like. So, basically speaking, it's a 150cc engine. Mine's been upgraded a couple of millimeters. The CVT transmission internally, I have a stock variator with the bigger fan, the 115mm fan on it. Right now I have 12-gram rollers in there, but I'm sacrificing some top speed for some more torque. This thing really likes to take off. I think I'm going to switch to the 12-gram sliders. In the back, I do have a Dr. Pulley HIT clutch in there, and bell, and the stock torque converter, and a Kevlar belt. It's just like a snowmobile setup almost. The Baja Dune 150s came with a reverse gear that was external, meaning it wasn't part of the engine case assembly. It gets bolted on. And I just dropped my keys, but the external assembly was run by a cable that pulls a planetary gear set in and out. And that cable setup is there. They're kind of difficult to find. A lot of people have issues with that. When I started upgrading the engine, it came to me with a generator fuel tank on it, not the factory fuel tank, so I can get a little bit more out of there. Runs it a little bit heavier, but I can have a lot more fun for a lot longer. Digressing. Basically, upgrading the fuel system, the CVT, and the exhaust are going to give you a lot of performance gains that you desire out of a 150 that you normally wouldn't get. Other than that, without splitting the case or without going with a big bore kit, that's about it for performance-wise when you're on a budget. I upgraded the rear shocks. I'm going to change these shocks out for a different set. Those are candy shocks, and they're pretty stiff for me. I have them at a higher setting. I'm going to drop them down and see if it's any better, but it's still pretty bouncy in the rear. The stereotypical pitfalls of a Baja Dune 150 or the Punisher 150R from Tomberlin, which were identical buggies except for some frame modifications. The seats rot out. Very, very common. I recovered these seats. I put a little extra foam padding in there and recovered the bottoms with some old seat material I had lying around from some school buses. But that is one of the major pitfalls of these. The seat frames rot out. My headrest is no longer adjustable. Common upgrade is to find a nice set of used RZR seats. They work really well. Moving forward, we have what we call a dual A-arm suspension. This buggy has front and rear disc brakes. It's got a single disc brake on the rear, and that is mounted to the axle. I have an upgraded one because I cracked my old one hitting some bumps. The factory sprocket is a 32 tooth sprocket. I have a 39 on there. And there's the rear caliper, rotor. Obviously, I'm running a little bit bigger tires than stock. If you want to upgrade your wheels and tires, a lot of the times you can find a set of wheels and tires. The rears are 4x137 bolt pattern, and they were 10-inch rims. The fronts were, I believe, 8-inch rims. They could have been 10s. I can't remember. They're sitting in my shop somewhere. But to put the larger wheels and tires on, I had to buy adapters, hub adapters, because all four of my wheels are 4x137 bolt pattern, and the fronts are 4x110 on all Crossfires, Punishers, and Dune 150s. So I upgraded it with a spacer. That's a 1-inch spacer, and it's 4x110 to 4x137 bolt pattern. The dual A-arm suspension, we have a shock on the frame, and it goes down to the lower control arm. A very, very big flaw in these is over time they start to rot out. Water sits inside these tubes, and they rot out and break off right here. So I bought the BDX shock adapter so I can run a shorter shock on there, and I welded them directly to the control arm after I reinforced the control arm with some 1/4-inch plating. And there's your front disc brakes. You got calipers on both wheels. And they go to a distribution block, which goes all the way back to the master cylinder. It's a rack and pinion steering. Another thing that has a flaw, these rot out, so it's good to slap a little bit of grease on there and try to cover it up the best you can. It's tough to find these replacement parts, so just keep it moving. Don't let it sit for long periods of time, and keep it well lubricated and covered so that you don't get dirt and stuff in there. The other major flaw with all Baja Dune 150s, Crossfire 150s, and Punisher 150s was the small ball joints they use. These ball joints, which you can tell this one's been replaced because all the others are painted to match. If you hit anything, these bend very, very easily right here, right at the nut. A bent ball joint affects the alignment, affects your tire wear, affects your steering. So being able to upgrade these to the Tomberlin Crossfire 150R set requires some drilling, tapping, or possibly what I did on my old Dune buggy. I drilled out this centerpiece here, tapped it for a 14-150 thread ball joint, which is what the Crossfire 150R uses. That would be the red control arms on the latest of the Crossfires. They were discontinued in 2008 and 2009. So what's typical for the Baja Dune 150 was the cheesy bumper. I like them, some people don't, but only the Baja Dune 150 and the Punisher 150R had that front bumper. The Crossfires, the main difference is the Crossfires would have big bug eyes right here instead. So basic controls. This would have been your parking brake. I snapped my cable and I'm not inclined to go buy another one just yet. That's a parking brake cable, and then the second shifter is your forward and reverse. Now, as a point of note, the major flaw with the external reverse gear was if the engine was revving and you pulled it into reverse, or you were going from reverse to forward, if the engine was at a higher RPM, it would not disengage that reverse gear. And that planetary would strip out the center gear, and you would be stuck in either forward only or reverse, or in my case, on my original unit, I was stuck in neutral. It completely stripped out that center gear and would not contact either way. Simple fix for that was to turn your idle down. That was number one. Idle was a big issue. And you would turn down the idle, and you would have to come to a complete stop, wait for the engine to come down a little bit, and then you can shift. But for those that are just getting these buggies and experiencing issues with shifting, you got to come to a complete stop, and you have to let the buggy slow down, the engine-wise. Otherwise, it will not change gears, or you're going to end up harming that gear. It's why they moved to a totally different type of reverse gear later on. In fact, Baja stayed with an external reverse, but they included it inside the case in their later model engines, 2008, 2009. But it was still under the same premise. It still had a shifter fork that was weak, and you still had to worry about your engine revs. So upgrading the battery is a good point. I I've got mine just secured in there until I can fab up a new mount and a little bit better way to mount a bigger battery. I'm actually going to go with a larger battery. This is just one of your standard TX12s or the A12 battery. I'm probably going to go to a size 14. And that is about it. So as far as upgrading goes, fuel and exhaust are really, really big. And CVT, that's going to be the best bang for the buck. So that's Race My Buick, Mackey's Motors. And this is my Baja Dune 150. If you have any questions, post them up. Just ask.